I'm going to open a brand new file here. And this is a combined file that was sent, theoretically sent to me, and I needed to start working with it. And you'll notice each of these files is part of a combined drawing set, and so this is 48 pages. But there's a few issues with these. One, this could be a really, really large file, and so you have to start dealing with file size when you start talking about more than maybe a dozen or 2 dozen files. But even more than that, I need to start understanding what's on the page. Who was the author of this? When was this released? What's really on the page? If I were to look at these little previews over here, I can kind of glance and maybe see, hey, this is probably building elevations, but I don't know about what. What discipline is it? Who does it pertain to? What is the drawing number? Things like that are really kind of critical pieces of information that I should start leveraging. And that starts with the page labels themselves. So I'm going to go ahead and create some page labels. Again, I'm going to fly through this a little bit. There is kind of a workflow video that's available on our website as well if you'd like to be able to see this. But basically, I can go ahead and select page regions to pull information out of. I want to pull snippets of text out of the title block, for example, to be able to define what these names are. So under page region, I'm going to go ahead and select and zoom in and pick a snippet of the page to go ahead and pull this information from. So I'm going to click and drag around this A2.1 in this case, and I'm under the assumption that this is going to be the same region on every single drawing in this set. All 48 pages should have a defined location for these page numbers. I'm also going to kind of do an additional region for the page number or page name, for example. So I'm going to click and drag around this page name, and you'll notice that gives me a preview here. As I click OK, I want to assign it to all 48 pages, and as I run this process, it's going to look for that snippet of text, those 2 different regions, and basically do an automatic naming convention for me. And as I scroll through, you'll notice that those names are actually very consistent. And so instead of it just being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I now can actually see at a glance what these particular pages are. So in this case, the striping plan, which I click on and pop it open. Okay, so to take that a step further, I want to start working with these files as individual sheets. Right now it's a combined set. It could start bogging down my computer, and even more so than that, I need to work with a team of people, and they may have their own disciplines or their own files that they are responsible for. And if I have this combined set open on my computer, they're not going to be able to edit it on their versions as well. So it kind of becomes a hiccup if everyone's starting to, try and work on their own information if I have everyone locked out. So I'm going to actually create individual sheets, and then I can then only work on the files that I care about and leave the rest of those unlocked for the rest of my team. So I can do this under a right click from the thumbnails panel. You can actually see extract pages. This will extract all these files out as individual files. Now before I do this, I'm going to go ahead and open the destination folder so we can see what this looks like. Basically, this is a blank folder, this is the extracted pages folder. As I run this process and extract all 48 pages, I'm going to run it as individual separate files, and I'm also going to leverage that page label that I just went through and created as the file naming convention for myself. So if I had hyperlinks, I would also update those hyperlinks with relative paths so they would still work with each other even if I strip these files apart from each other. So go ahead and click OK. I'm going to select that extracted pages folder and go ahead and click. Now, before I could even get into the folder, you can see that it filled up with those 48 pages, all as individual files for me. And I can open any one of these just with the click of a button. Now these are all one-page documents that are drawn from this larger set. This, and let's see if I can find this page, A4.20. is the same file as this A4.20 that you see here. However, it's, again, one sheet of 48 or one of one in this particular case. So the last step of this phase of the document processing world is the ability to kind of make these files talk to each other. So now that they're no longer in a combined set, I have the problem of, for example, I zoom in here and I need to see this particular cut section, or I need to see this cut section, or I need to see a certain detail call out, or whatever it may be. And so working with that information, I have to go back out into my files and maybe hunt for that particular piece. But if that call out, for example, was automatically linked for me, it would be no issue, and I could just kind of go on my way just by clicking a hyperlink. And so that's exactly what I'm going to do. Now, this is an extreme-only feature, and so again, I will go over the details of what that means later. But the idea is that this will work on anyone that has Revu Extreme on their computer. You can do a lot of hyperlinking in the standard and CAD versions as well. So under File and Batch, I'm going to go ahead and select Link, and I'm going to pull in the files that I had extracted. So I'm going to pull that folder, those extracted files, and you can see here it's just pulling the folder itself, which has those 48 individual files within it. As I click Next, I'm going to go ahead and match, or basically pull the information based on the sheet number. Now, if I had done these page labels to just be the sheet number themselves, I could go ahead and create, based on some page label. But if I know the detail callouts themselves are just the page number, I'm going to have to go ahead and kind of recreate those based on page region. So go ahead and click OK. It gives me an example file to go ahead and define my search term, which is fine. I'll go ahead and click OK. And then I'm going to select Generate, and it's going to look in that region on all 48 pages for me. And you'll see I now have a generated search terms for all of these files. Neat little list for me to be able to quality check if I'd like. They all look pretty good. So before I go ahead and run this process, I'm going to give all these links a nice yellow fill so I can see them very easily. So as I click around, it's going to look for the snippet of text A1.1.1. If it finds it, it hyperlinks it back to this sheet. Or if it finds, anything for A1.1.2, it's going to hyperlink it to that sheet. And so you can see within a couple seconds, it created almost 300 hyperlinks, which each one of these yellow spots is now hyperlinked to the respective files. So I can go ahead and turn the pages back as well using these back buttons. It functions just like it would on a web browser. And I can see all this information at the click of a button and be able to zoom into those respective details. Okay, so now I have 48 files, and they're all hyperlinked to each other. They're all ready to be worked on. So the last thing I'm going to go ahead and do is actually create some sort of set, kind of an overarching process that really kind of draws these all back and works as a cohesive document. Now, it may seem a little bit counterintuitive that I went through and split these files up, and then I want them to function as if they were one file, because they were already one file originally. Now, this has, again, several advantages, one of them being that these files are now lighter weight, because I'm only opening one document at a time. I'm also not locking out my teammates to work with these files. But I also want to take advantage of a number of other features that are available within Revu. One is the ability to categorize all these documents. If I look, for example, in the Windows Explorer of this this page, you'll see that these are kind of categorized based on the first letter, but the architecturals are first, and then the civils, and then the electricals, and I don't even get to, for example, the sheet index until G, which is 2/3 of the way to the end, and then the structural at the end. So I really kind of want this to be one cohesive defined set for me with categories, and I also want some sort of summary drawing table or drawing log that I can go ahead and leverage as well, kind of as a cover page. So those feature sets would live under sets. So again, I'm going to come up to my tab access, and sets lives here about 2/3 of the way down. And as of right now, it's blank, but basically this will become my thumbnails view, or my hub, to be able to get at all of my files. So what I'm going to do is under modify set, I'm going to create a brand new set. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and close all of those other files before I get into this. But sets, brand new set here. Now, it will prompt me to say that what I'm working with is 2016 only, which is true, but for those of you that are not on 2016, there are sets functionalities for version 12 and 2015 as well. So just be cognizant of who you're working with and what feature sets you are utilizing. So I'm going to go ahead and add a whole bunch of files to this particular set. Now, I could add those original 48 files, but I'm actually going to add files from different folders as well to kind of show the flexibility of this. Some cases, I'm going to add my original files, or basically my baseline files that would be added for a new project, and it'll be the architectural, maybe the electrical files, add those in. Or I could add all files from including a subfolder and basically just go to the originals and add those all at once. Now, I'm not going to do that in this particular case, but I will come back and add revisions here in a bit. Now, I'm going to come to the options here, and this allows me to basically sort and filter all this information because the sets can be quite cumbersome when you start talking about hundreds or thousands of pages for an entire document or an entire project, and you need kind of a central hub to get around all this information and want them organized. So under sorting, or actually under categories, I can pick what letters I want to define, or kind of pick out these different categories. And so you can see here I have kind of a default list, and I can go ahead and rearrange these, the orders of these, or I can go ahead and add new ones. Maybe we'll call this demolition, and this will be a category D. And this will, in this case, add it to the end. I'll go ahead and pull it up under civil, for example. And you'll see that this will now be added to the list, and this is exactly how my drawings will categorize for me. The last and probably most important tab within this options is the ability to create tags. Tags are kind of the metadata behind the page. For example, the sheet name, sheet number. I'm also going to add a couple kind of predefined standards based on the sheet numbering convention, namely discipline and sheet type. I'm also going to add the drawing date. So you'll see that I will need to go through and define regions, or basically auto mark 3 of these criteria, and the other 3 will kind of auto fill in from that point. So as I click OK, I run this process, and it's going to kind of open all these files and allow me to name each one of these. Now in this case, the sheet name is not defined on this particular file, and so I'm going to go ahead and skip this. This is, something I don't need to pull information from, and I can go back and actually fill this information in later if I'd like, but I'm going to skip this particular one and just hop into the first sheet that has a true title block. So under sheet name, I'm going to go ahead and select and just click and drag around the sheet name. Now, I give it a little bit of a buffer in any direction just so I can go ahead and capture all that information in case the sheet name gets a little bit longer on a different sheet. As I click OK, it will run those process, and it will now look for the sheet number. So same process. Now, on this particular case, it actually has a sheet number on this file, which is good, because when I zoom in, I can go ahead and define it for it. Now it's going to ask for the drawing date. Again, I don't have a region for the drawing date, but if I did, I would be able to click and drag and define that item. But it's actually finding the drawing date on all the other sheets as well. I will need to give it a date for this one, so I go ahead and select and give it the date of January 1st. So What it did is looked in all those regions, again, across all of my sheets based on what I defined for it, and it went through and caught all of that information without me really having to get into the manual process of filling out, for example, a table of information. You'll notice some of these may or may not be the exact result I need. For example, the sheet numbers on these electrical items don't seem to be filling in correctly. So what I'm going to do is select those and re-auto mark. So it's going to ask for the sheet number. And you can see the number here may be a little bit larger than it is on the other sheets. I go ahead and click OK, and those will now redefine for me and define the discipline and sheet type based on that information as well. Now all these default to the Rev 0, which is intentional. That just assumes that these are all kind of baseline files. If they were not, I could go ahead and select them and, for example, use the number counter to change what I'd like. But the last thing I'm going to do is give this information, for example, the sheet index for the name, and I'm going to give it a date of, we'll give it May 1st, for example. Okay, now I'm ready to apply these to my original files and create my set. It's a pretty easy process to do. You literally click OK. It goes through, adds all that smart information to each of the documents, and you can now at a glance see that I have a organized set based on different categories, so general, architectural, and electrical, and all of the subsequent files that are part of this. So, for example, a lot of these files have markups on them, and so I need to make sure I understand those, can review them, and I can see that based on the thumbnails view. But I also would want those to carry over, and this may or may not be true depending on your particular workflow, but I would want them to carry over to a later revision. And so I can do that by when I add a new set, or excuse me, new files, and I can do so from the add files to set. I'm going to add new revisions. I'm going to add all of them, including some plumbing and some structural files, and these will be new files. It's going to look in those regions that I've already predefined for it and add brand new tags. So it's doing a lot of behind-the-scenes processing to find all the smart information, but it's a pretty neat function to be able to make that happen. So it looks like these architectural files were not caught correctly, so I'm going to re-auto mark those and give them a new sheet number. And you can see here at a glance, I can audit this very easily, but 3 of these files now have a rev of 1. Basically it's saying, hey, I've seen this sheet number before. This now must be a revision of the rev 0 that we found up here, which is true. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and it's going to prompt me to basically say, do I want to carry over all that smart information and basically supersede stamp the old file? The answer is yes. I basically want it to ensure that I'm not working off an old file, so I go ahead and click OK. And as we go find one of those files under the architectural item here, whoops, you'll see that all these markups are currently on the page, even though this is the Rev 1. Basically, it carried over the markups that were on the Rev 0 and pulled them into the Rev 1 just like I requested. It also put a giant superseded stamp on the top of the page, so I can't accidentally work off of an old file. It's basically doing that slip sheeting for me and allowing me to have only the latest and greatest as an active file and just use the superseded as a historical file. So last thing I want to show before we get into touch on the collaboration aspect is the ability to export to drawing log. So I have all the smart table of information under tags. I want to start leveraging that to control my documents or understand what's in my drawing sets, and I can do that utilizing the export drawing log. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and pick what metadata or information I want to include in my drawing log, so I can check or uncheck any of these boxes. For this particular instance, I'm just going to send it to Excel, but I would be able to send it to PDF as well if I'd like. And then I'm going to go ahead and create hyperlinks. So this would be pretty neat. What this is going to do is allow me to take that table of information, pull it into Excel that I can start filtering and sorting and doing all sorts of neat stuff. But each one of these blue cells here is basically a hyperlink back to that document. So if I wanted to jump to L1.0, I click on it. You'll notice that it kind of reconfigures that screen and brings me to L1.0. Same process. If I scroll down, I want to see A3.02. It moves, finds that file for me, and allows me to start working in that very easily. And so I can have the two systems talk to each other without any sort of manual process up front.